Owen's here as well. He came by car. He's a bit more boring. Nikkei's not long shot. Day to forget for Japanese investors, though.
Nikkei looks a bit like that jet ski sort of thing now. Perfect arc, unfortunately, on the downward spiral, very much beneath the waves there. The Nikkei closing 1.2% down after a rotten day's trade, and very much a day's trading to forget. The Hang Seng is still trading, but I imagine most investors will be glad to see the end of the day in similar sort of territory. Even the ASX in Sydney couldn't find any gains today, closing around 1.5% down. I'll just mention briefly, Stuart, while we're talking markets, Moody's on Monday placing 8 Spanish banks and 2 holding companies on review for possible downgrades. It's unfortunately all, once again, about downgrades this week.
OK, well, once again, that lack of confidence put the stress back in some of the Eurozone's most vulnerable economies. Both Spain and Italy have suffered a rise in borrowing costs, but France is also now feeling the strain. The top credit ratings agencies are warning its golden AAA rating is no longer guaranteed. And for the first time, President Nicolas Sarkozy appears to have conceded this possibility. And Siobhan Silk reports.
The French government was dismissive that the country could lose its treasured AAA credit rating, but now that the prospect seems more likely, the tone has changed. President Nicolas Sarkozy told French daily Le Monde it would be one more difficulty, but not an insurmountable one, and that the country would face a downgrade calmly. Investors remain nervous. A market bounce after the EU's fiscal harmony deal on Friday has been quickly reversed by that downgrade threat. On Tuesday, Asian markets opened down on the news. Investors seem to be giving more sway to the ratings agency's analyses than to EU efforts to curb the debt crisis.
They are just trying to delay the crisis in Europe, so that really does not give any confidence to the market. And investors sold out, and you see the stock markets in Europe and America falling sharply overnight, and it carried over to Asia today.
But ratings agencies are threatening downgrades across the EU, and in the end it's the very breadth of the threat that could help soften the blow. Even if the AAA rating becomes a thing of the past, investors will still be looking for a home for their funds in Europe. And the EU can take comfort that Standard & Poor's downgrade of the US in the summer was far from catastrophic. It confounded expectations by driving borrowing costs down.
Well, of course, one country that knows a thing or two about feeling the wrath of the rating agencies is Italy. Its volatility in the bond markets is partly because of the downgrades that it's suffered in recent times, and its borrowing costs are once again spiking after a little bit of respite. Let's get some more on this from our correspondent in Rome, it's Seema Gupta. Good morning to you, Seema. We had another important bond auction on Monday. There is still healthy demand for Italian debt, but surely this country cannot continue borrowing at these sort of levels.
Exactly. I mean, if you look at the yields on the 10-year bonds in particular, I mean, they've gone back up again on Monday, even closer to that 7% mark that analysts say make borrowing costs unsustainable. And this despite the ECB intervention to buy some bonds, as has been reported. Now, the markets don't appear to be assured by that EU summit last week. If you saw the bond yields just in the lead up to that summit, they had dropped, but again, they've come back up again. They don't believe that the Eurozone countries have come up with a long-term solution, if any, to the Eurozone debt crisis. And if you look at what the Moody's ratings agency said yesterday, that few new measures have come out of that summit. On top of that, as you mentioned, the demand on the sale for one-year bonds, though, was there. And that's because the government had a sort of a BOT day, they called it, in which the banks dropped the commission on the sale of those bonds. So they managed to reach a 7 billion euros worth of sales on that one-year bond. But we'll have to see what happens in another auction set on Wednesday for the 5-year bonds. There perhaps could be more challenges ahead in that one.
Seema, Italy also in for some severe austerity, and the backlash there, I gather, is really starting now.
Yes, exactly. I mean, there was strikes seen yesterday here in Italy, in cities all around the country, and there are expected to be more strikes for the rest of the week. Later this week, even transport strikes, as well as bank staff going on strike, and public sector workers as well. And so basically, it's because the trade unions believe that these austerity measures that have been put in place by Prime Minister Mario Monti's government are not equitable enough. They feel that it hits out on the pensioners as well as the lower income income families, and they want to see more done in terms of the wealthy being made to pay more. Now, currently, the austerity measures are before a parliamentary budget committee, and there are expected to be amendments. The welfare minister announced yesterday that there could be possible modifications on, particularly on the issue of pension reforms, and Mario Monti is expected to meet this budget commission later today. So we'll have to see what actually comes out, because of course these austerity measures have to be approved by the lower house, and that's expected to happen this week before it goes to the Senate for final approval. And we'll have to see what shape or form these austerity measures take. But the government has said that they have to reach that 20 billion mark in terms of spending cuts and tax hikes. So it's a question of juggling the figures to get to that mark.
Seema, thanks a lot. That's Seema Gupta covering that story for us from Rome there.
OK, let's catch up with a couple more of the day's business headlines for you now. The Dutch financial regulator has suspended trading in Saab's parent company. The halt was called when shares in Swedish Automobile, that's the new name for Spyker, which bought Saab earlier this year, sank 20%. Saab is currently in administration and is trying to take itself out of bankruptcy protection, while also discussing a potential €100 million buyout with two Chinese firms.
And a new battle for the skies is brewing between Virgin and Lufthansa. Virgin says it's negotiating with its German rival to take struggling budget carrier BMI off its hands. British Airways and Iberia parent company IAG is also vying for BMI, which lost more than €150 million in the first 9 months of the year. It's understood Virgin is offering around €50 million, around half of IAG's offer. And just before we go, another chapter in Hollywood's decline has been written by some computer-generated soldiers, Owen.
Well, it says it all these days, Stuart, that computer games, the industry, has got so big that the manufacturers can now get Hollywood A-list stars to actually advertise their own games. I'm talking about Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3. The latest in that series is now officially bigger than the highest grossing movie ever made. That was Avatar. It passed the $1 billion sales mark. That's according to manufacturers Activision. They're a little bit flaky about the figures, but these seem to be accurate. This went on sale in the last month or so, took around $400 million in its first weekend. That's even bigger, for example, than the last Harry Potter installment in the summer, which took around just over $300 billion. So 300 million, I should say. So you get the picture. It's these games are outstripping the box office in Hollywood. Many analysts now say that Hollywood is being rendered somewhat obsolete by the computer games industry. These are huge events, huge sales. The only advantage perhaps that movies have over computer games is you see quite a steep tail off in sales. There's huge interest in these sort of games during the first month or so, but it might well be, but movies tend to have a little bit more staying power in terms of their worldwide growth. So I don't think we can quite kiss goodbye to movies just yet.
Not quite. They should get some more appropriate actors, Julie Andrews or Macaulay Culkin or someone like that. You know, dress them up in
Modern Warfare. I think we'll send a memo to the manufacturers.
Exactly, it's a good idea.
Recommend that for the next one.
We'll patent that one. All right, Owen, thanks a lot. Owen there with the business news. We'll be back just over an hour's time here on France 24. Claire, though, she's back a little bit earlier than that, just after the weather forecast with the latest news. Stay tuned if you can.